This is a Celebration 125 podcast.
Around 1922, had purchased 40 acres just off Camp Road, 7 miles from here, and was all bush. And the 3 of us moved up there, on the 5 of us all together. And we lived in a 8 by 12 shack. I believe the shack come from the hop yard when the hop yard was on, or some of the hop yard was on the Tramner farm. I believe that's where it come from. Anyway, my dad hauled it up there with team and horses, and that's where we lived. There was 5 of us in the shack, and then Dad built the house, and we moved in there just before Christmas in 34, and I don't remember much about that. Just little things I remember. But anyway, my mother and Rena and myself went to Vancouver about a couple days before Christmas, because my mother wanted to. There was nothing in the house. The house was just a shell, and so she wanted to go down to visit her parents. They were still living, which she did. We did, and at that time we had to go to Walleach Station, here 5-6 miles, and we had to flag the train down. And the only trains that stopped at Walleach were the Kettle Valley trains. That was the only trains that stopped. We had to flag them, hold out a green and white flag. And anyway, we got on the train, went to Vancouver, and we were there for Christmas. And I think it was Boxing Day night. We came back, and there was a terrible storm here. Snow was flying, and the conductor said, I won't let you off here unless there's somebody there to meet you. So he said, if not, I'll take you through to Ruby Creek and you can come back in the morning train, the daylight train. So anyway, the train stopped at Walleach, and Mum hollered for Darcy, and he hollered. So he was there with a team and sleigh and a little bit of hay. I know we got underneath the hay there, but there was a terrible wind was blowing. And we lived about a mile and a half, I guess, away from the Walleach station. We had to go with team and horses. And the next morning, I remember when we got up, the snow was up to the top of the fence posts, and we were snowed in for 6 weeks. Yeah, you won't believe that, but it did happen. And anyway, I remember Mum saying, I can just remember this, well, all we have left is spuds and pickles. So anyway, that day, Dad started shoveling. They had a cat come up, and it broke down about 2.5 miles from our place, and so he started shoveling a path out, and as he got to Leo Edmondson, Leo come out, and then he helped, and then he got to Donald McKay, and old Donald came out, so the 3 of them shoveled this path out, and they shoveled it for about 2.5 miles. It took about 3 days. And then the next day after that, he walked to Agassiz with a pack sack and got groceries. And and he spent the night with my grandfather and grandmother. They were still on the farm at that time. And then the next morning, Grandpa took Dad up to where the old cat had broke down, and then he walked from there home. And then it was about a week later or something like that, the mailman, I forget his name. I can't remember his name now. What was it, Rena? Don't remember. Anyway, he come up with our mail. He brought our mail up here, and we had Christmas cards and everything else because we hadn't picked our mail up. And it was things that, you tell people that story and they don't believe you, but it did happen. Because Irina was there too, so. I'm not pulling your leg, so. Yeah. So anyway, things got better. The depression was not over, but there was a little more work around and what have you. And Dad was clearing the land, and he did clear it with stumping powder and horses. That's how he cleared that 40 acres. And worked like a horse, God, he was an awful man to work. Anyway, it was about 35 or something like that, 36, maybe 36. Mom wanted to go to Vancouver to see her parents, and she had got her sisters down there. So Dad had a Model T Ford car, and but it was parked at Grandpa's in his garage because he didn't have enough money to put license on it. So anyway, he had to get a license for this car and brought it up to the farm. And there's a couple of guys that lived in the bush there beside us, Johnny Nelson. He milked the cows when we were gone. And we got into the car and went over the mountain road here and got to Harrison Mills, just the other side of the bridge. And there was a logging railway across the road, so we had to wait for them to clear that. And old Bob Callender, he was a conductor on that train. Anyway, 4 hours down and 4 hours back on this Model T Ford. And anyway, things did get a little better, but the times were a little better as the years went on, and we got I think Dad then bought a Model A Ford car, and then he bought a 37 Oldsmobile, I think it was, and better cars, better seats, and what have you, but yeah. And then he tried for 2 years to get a milker. And because we were milking about, I think it was around 18 head at that time. And that's a lot of cattle to milk morning and night, and all by hand. We didn't have a milking machine. And it was a lot of work, a lot of hard work. Anyway, so he decided to sell, and he sold the farm in 1945. And here we are today, and thank you very much for coming. No. So anyway, then I got a job in working for Gordon Hardy in the garage, and I was there for about 3 or 4 years. And I used to come to the station here and pick up express for the garage. And I got to know one of the operators here, and he said, "How'd you like a job as a wiper?" Well, I thought, yeah, wiper, that'd be a wiper, fireman, engineer. So I said, yeah, that'd be fine. So he said, okay, so I know the locomotive foreman at North Bend. I'll write him a letter. And he did. Wrote him a letter, never heard anything. And so, I had to do something. So then he said to me, Spratshaw College have a telegraphy course in Vancouver. So he said, you could go that and then go out as an operator. And I thought, well, okay. So I went to Vancouver, and I was in that course. And with telegraph, you had to, it's hard to explain it, because it wasn't dot dash, it was clicks, so you had to memorize the code first, and then you would listen to it coming from over the sounder, and you might get A, and you might get a M, you know, like A was dot dash, and M was two dashes, and E was one dot, and Z was three dots and another one, that was Z. So you had to have this in your mind, and so anyway, I went to that school and I was there for I don't know, 3 months or something like that, learning this telegraph. And the railways at that time, both CP and CN, they were preparing for the 40-hour week. Like at that time, we worked 6 days a week. And they were preparing for the 40-hour week. And so that's why they needed these operators. And at the same time, CP was running a telegraph school at night in Vancouver. So I'd go to that thing too, and I got to know some of the guys there. And after being there 3 months, I thought, Jesus, you know, I'm a whiz now, and you know, there's no problem with this until you sit down and it's coming at you. And it's quite a bit different. Yeah, it's you're still doing the same thing, A and D and B and so on, you know, and you catch it. Then you'll catch like a word, and was an easy one, and the was pretty easy. You know, these would come out to you. So finally, you're writing down and you're writing down the, and pretty soon you're writing down more than that. And so then the chief at North Bend, they needed an assistant agent at Lytton. That was in July of 1949. So I went up there to work as assistant agent. And at that time, CP had a merchandise car come in every day for the 6 days, because we worked 6 days then. And they would set the car off, and it was merchandise for Lytton and for Merritt. And CP Express operated this truck from Lytton to Merritt every day. And so we had to load these trucks, the truck, and then load the freight for the local delivery. And that's about what that was. And at Lytton at the time there were just two shifts on, the day shift, the agent, and the night shift. Well, business was picking up, and pretty soon they put on 3 shifts. And then the agent there, he knew the chief dispatcher of North Bend, a guy by the name of Bert Fagan, awful nice guy. And so he talked to him about me going out as an operator. Well, then you've got to go to I had to go to North Bend and have a wire test, and which I did. And I was scared. Geez, I was nervous, you know. And anyway, he always said, "Kid," he said, "you can telegraph." He said, "Oh," I said, "I don't know about that, but I try." So anyway, I went back to Lytton, and then 3 or 4 months later, then I went out as an operator. That was in June 1950. And the first job I went on was what they called a ditcher. It was a steam shovel, and there was a couple of air dumps, one on each side of the ditcher. The ditcher ran on rails on a flat car. And it would ditch the sidings and this kind of thing off the track. And at that time, you could just cast over or dump the gravel and rock anywhere. Now you can't certainly do it now, but that's what happened then. So this one day, we were, I think it was a Monday, and Hodder and Sam Hill, and we were going up to Wallachine, and went to Wallachine and went into the back track, and the cook had lunch. So I said to the conductor, I said, I'm going to go down to the station and see if he's got any orders for us. So I walked in the station, and the agent there was a man by the name of Bill Watkins. And I'd never met Bill. And it's hot, Jesus, the sun was beating down, Wallachine, an awful place for heat. And I can still see this. I walked in there, and you remember those old wash tubs? They were about 3 feet across, you know, and about yay high. Well, he had one of them there, and he's sitting in his chair, and he's got this wash tub there, and he's got his shoes and socks off, and his pants are rolled up to his knee, and he's got about 6 inches of water in this tub, and he's got his feet sticking. It's the funniest thing I ever Well, I guess it was kind of like, you know, a head of air conditioning, you know. Same type thing. He's a really nice guy. And he retired as agent at Hammond. But I'll never forget that. Anyway, then I think I got shoved off that job, and I went to the Common. They had an operator at the Common at that time, just at nights. You went to work at 6 p.m. and you worked till 2 a.m. and you were there to block the passenger trains because they had to keep them 20 minutes apart, and there was, at that time, there was no signals here, so it was all what they called dark territory. Anyway, I was there and for about a month, 7 days a week, and then damned if we didn't go on strike. So for the 40-hour week, that's what the strike was about. And anyway, they did get the 40-hour week after about, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. They were negotiating there. And anyway, they got the 40-hour week, but the company had 2 years to implement it. You got paid for the sixth day, I think it's straight time, I can't remember that. But I know we worked 6 days and we got paid for the 6th day. And that's why they were training all these operators, because at every station where you had 3 operators, well, it took another one, you know, because of the days off and a little bit more. But so that's why they needed all the operators. And as long as they had operators, they were always looking for operators. You know, it didn't matter what. Anyway, I don't know where I worked. I worked after the Common, or after that strike. I don't know. I think I was on a steel gang for a while, and then I worked at Mission, temporary, and worked at Vancouver, VD Vancouver, and then I went to North Bend, working nights at North Bend as an operator, and I'd never worked there before, you know, the terminal, and pretty busy, and lots of telegraph, and anyway, this operator that I relieved, he was showing me what this was, what that was, and something else. And then he said, there's these 4 holes here. You put a plug in there, and that rings, and the assistant superintendent, chief dispatcher, roadmaster, and locomotive foreman, they had phones, because BC Tel at that time, there was only one phone, a bay phone, in the Pig's Ear, which was a cafe. We called it the Pig's Ear. And now they call the Pig's Ear the beer parlor at Boston Park. Geez. And anyway, so he's showing me he said, when you push that plug in, that rings in that person's house, you know. And this is midnight. And I said, well, okay. I said, I hope we don't have to use that. And he said, it doesn't matter anyway. So pretty soon, this thing flipped down from one of these houses. So I answered it, Health Aids was his name. And he said, did you ring? And he was a great big guy. And I said, I said it was a mistake, Mr. Aids. I said the other operator was showing me how to work the phone, and I said, sorry it rang, in your house. Well, he said, okay. He said, I'll be talking to the chief dispatcher in the morning. And he said, you'd like to be fired. You can't do it. What are you going to do? So anyway, I did see the chief dispatcher in the morning. He didn't say anything. He was a real good guy, that fellow. He left us far too early. Yeah. But a lot of things, a lot of funny things happened, And then I stayed there in North Bend. As a matter of fact, I went there in 1950, 50 or 51, and I left there in 62 when I got bumped out of there. And that's another story. But it was a seniority thing and what have you. And I didn't have enough of it. That was happening. But anyway, then I bid in a relief dispatcher's job at North Bend, and eventually I got set up as a permanent dispatcher in 1955, and I was there until 62, and I got bumped in 62, and I had to then. There was 4 of us got bumped, and I was the senior one of the 4 that were bumped. So I had a bump first, and that bump was Third Trick Brookmere. And it's the only place I've ever had the experience of a clear sky and it was snowing. I don't know how that happened, but it was. So I was there for, I don't know, over the winter. And then in addition to that, I was relieving dispatchers in Vancouver, and we had moved to Agassiz from North Bend. And then the station here became vacant, so we moved in here, and we were living in the station here. But I wasn't here that much. Was relieving dispatchers in Vancouver, and then I claimed an 8-week vacancy in Revelstoke, and I'd never worked in Revelstoke before. But anyway, I went up there, and that caused a big storm, seniority-wise. But you can't believe what some of these things happened. Bloody seniority and people. And I was senior, so it shouldn't have been a problem, but it was. Anyway, I went up there on an 8-week vacancy in 63, and then the vacancy was over, and I come back here, and I was here until 64, I think. And then I got set up in Revelstoke, and we all had to move to Revelstoke, and I liked Revelstoke. It was a good place to work, and it was really good employees, good to work with. Some of these guys, weren't the easiest to work with, but they were good in Revelstoke. A lot of things happened up there, I don't know if it happened like that today. I don't know what would happen. Because you did a lot of things that weren't maybe according to what the rule book says you're supposed to do. But thank God there's no records of that. There was, but they're long gone. And I was there in Revelstoke until 68, in the fall of 68. Oh, and I should say that 3 of our oldest 3 kids were born in Chilliwack, and then when we went to Revelstoke, Lori come along, and so that was at last. She was born in Revelstoke. So, and then after I was there till 68, by fall of 68, and I was offered, well, I was working mostly nights and afternoons, and I was relieving the chief dispatchers, and so then I would be set up as a night chief, and that's the nights, so I was looking at nights for God knows how long. And I was offered the resident representative's job in Micah Creek, and and that was a day job. So I took that, and we lived in a 12 by 50 trailer, wasn't it? Yeah, then there was a bedroom built onto the outside of it. So we were there for 3 years, yeah. And then I got transferred to Vancouver in diesel utilization, and I had to go back on nights again, and I worked nights for a year, and then I don't know, the day guy got something, and I got the day job, and I was on days there for a couple of years, and then somebody got the bright idea that it would be good if we transfer all these diesel utilization jobs to one headquarters. And there was one in Vancouver, one in Winnipeg, one in Toronto, and one in Montreal. So somebody got the bright idea that Montreal would be the place to go. So away we went to Montreal, and we were there for 5 years? 5 years, then I got transferred back to Vancouver, and I was there for, 7, 8 years. Then I got transferred to Calgary, and I was there for 5 years. Then I got transferred back to Vancouver, and that was in 1987, and I retired in 1988. I started with CP Rail on July the 25th, 1949, and I retired August the 1st, 1988, so a long time. They were a really good company. They were good to me. I don't know what they're like now, but at that time, and there was good people, really nice people to work with and to deal with. And you knew, it's kind of funny, like you knew Bill and John and Harry and whatever. You might never met them, but you felt as though you knew them. You knew about their families and so on. Yeah, it was, and there was a lot of people. Today, I don't know. Like I got 2 boys, and they're both retired. They were signal maintainers, not here, but in the upper country, and they're both doing fine. And I got another daughter. She's in Alberta, and I got a daughter here. We're in Chilliwack. So that's the 4. My wife passed away in 1966. 96. Yeah, that wasn't good. Anyway.
Now you're back in Agassiz.
Huh?
Now you're back in Agassiz.
Now I'm back, where I was born.
This is a Celebration 125 podcast.